Good afternoon, good morning, good time of day, depending on where you are.
Hi all.
Welcome. It's Banner and Backbone. I'm Nick Perro, and I am co-founder here at Banner and Backbone. This is the Anti-Fascist Book Club, and I am joined today by my good friends Tara Devlin of Tara Buster,
Hey
welcome,
guys.
and Political Voices Network.
Yes.
Good morning. It's good to see you.
You too, guys. Nice to see everybody.
Next, we have our friend Stephanie Wilson, Doctor of History and uh, curator of Freedom Over Fascism and Better Humaning coaching. It's good to see you, Steph. How are you today?
I am doing well. It's great to see everybody in these times.
In these times, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And finally, joined by a new friend of ours. Thank you to Christopher Goldsmith for the introduction to Joe. Chris will be back with us again. He's got scheduling conflict due to some other stuff he's working on. Hey, that happens. But we got Joe today. So welcome, Joe. Joe is another veteran, a Better Humaning coach. Can you introduce yourself to everyone in the audience for us, so everyone gets to know you just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. My name's Joe Plunzler. I'm a Marine Corps combat veteran. I got out in 2015 and started out in the infantry and then ended up working in public relations, public affairs for the Marine Corps and doing a deep dive into how propaganda works when I was in grad school. So, my introduction to tracking right-wing groups, fascist groups, goes all the way back to the first time I went up to a anti-Ku Klux Klan rally on my college town back in 1990, in the spring of 1990. So,
Nice.
That whole experience kind of taught me, you sometimes in your life you got to put your body physically where your values are and show up.
Yep.
And it started there and continued on, and kind of counterintuitively joined the Marine Corps officer program after that experience. But then, I really strongly believe that a standing army is the greatest threat to our liberty. That goes all the way back to our founders, and that the people in charge of our military need to be very clear-headed and wed to the Constitution so that it supports our rights, not takes away from them. So I think we're at a critical point in our nation's history right now, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah.
So glad you're here with us, especially right now, because this is the Anti-Fascist Book Club for everybody. Welcome in the audience. Most of y'all know who and what we do. We are anti-fascism. We hate it. We don't like it. It sucks. It needs to go away. We're also reading Strongmen, from Mussolini to the Present by Ruth Ben-Ghiat. And this week's discussion is kind of the perfect one for you, Joe, with your background, because we're going to be talking about chapters 4 and 5, which is A Greater Nation and Propaganda. And so today's episode is A Greater Nation Through Propaganda, which we're living through. We're living through a propagandized America and a propagandized world in a lot of way, and we're living through an epistemic war. And I'd love your thoughts, Joe, on all of that here in just one moment. But before we begin, let's talk about real quick what the book club is and what it isn't. The Anti-Fascist Book Club is a place for us to learn. It's a place for us to get information. It's a place for us to teach and be able to curate knowledge in a group. But it's also a place for us to provide you the tools so that you can do it yourself. Because doing it in person, if it's safe for you or safe for those around you, is a really powerful thing to do. It builds community. It builds support. It supports wherever you're going and hosting your meetings, say the local library or your home, if that's safer, whatever it may be. Try the local library, because then you can do it in public and you're not hiding anything, or in a safe room. But that's what the book club is. We're teaching you. We're giving you tools, and we're helping you learn how to communicate and provide this information in real life back to your people. What this is not a catch-all. This is not the only thing you need to do. This is not the only tool you need. This is just part of it. We're here to teach and share some knowledge, and prepare you and give you some ideas to be able to talk about in life, but it's not an excuse to not do anything else. So, Joe, with that bit of framing and where we are in Strongmen, the book itself, around the greater nation and propaganda, because they really fit into each other. Those two chapters are themed really well. And I want to get your thoughts on them.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, it all comes down to the manipulation of perception, right? When people want to gain power and gain power over masses of people, they really need to shape their thoughts, which drive their behaviors, right? So, to me, we all hallucinate reality, is what neuroscientists scientists will tell you, right? We never really achieve objective understanding of our environment, because all of what our brain hallucinates as reality comes through the windows of our perception. We see very narrow spectrum of light. We only hear a certain amount of the frequency of sound. And, the things that are outside the immediate range of our five senses are totally constructed, right? Which becomes a very garbage in, garbage out process. Like, how do I know there's a war in Ukraine going on right now? I didn't go there to fact check that myself, right? I've got to build that reality out of sources, and hopefully the sources that I'm going to are credible sources, right? And so in military terms, when we're building that perception, typically we use multiple means and sources to determine what is the ground truth per se of what's happening in a certain area. So like what's going on in Iran right now with the protests, right? We're not just taking one person's word for it. We're building that picture based off of different sources, and then technical means, and then also building that reality through cross-checking that stuff and not believing the first report, right? So when we talk about that, I think the other kind of key lever that when people are trying to propagandize, one of the main tools that they use is fear, right? And let me nerd out on neuroscience for a minute. You've got really this push-pull relationship between two different parts of your brain. And one is what we call the amygdala. It's two like almond-sized glands that sit on top of your old brain stem, if this is kind of like your brain on the side. And then right up front here is our prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the reason center, the thinking center, the stuff that puts the brakes on all the bad decisions. And if we were to put you in a functional MRI machine and show you your worst nightmare, we could watch your fight or flight center start up. We could watch your prefrontal cortex shut down, right? Which is why it is so imperative that if somebody's going to be successful at propaganda, typically they need to make people afraid, because when you're afraid, reason center shuts down, you become malleable to changing perceptions, which will change your behaviors, right? And so we see that at play quite a bit. And once you understand the mechanisms that people use, it becomes easier to detect, and then easier for it, kind of like if you're defusing a bomb, which wire to cut so that you're not susceptible to it anymore, right? It's like magic. Like a magician's tricks are amazing until you understand how they do them, and then they're pedestrian, right? So those are kind of some of my initial thoughts. I'll nerd out on neuroscience all day, so like give me a tug on the ear if I'm going too far down that rabbit hole. But yeah, fear is a big part of it. So anytime you have a strong reaction, you start feeling fear about news you're consuming, the first question you ought to do is ask yourself, to whose advantage is my fear? Because 99% of the time it's not your own, right? So yeah, let me stop there. And
No, it's fine. It's interesting.
I think what's really interesting, if you combine that, the appeal to the amygdala and political strategy, which we know from all of history is if you divide people against each other, then you have a better chance of ruling them, right? As long as the people on the bottom are fighting each other, the people at the top either make money or gain more power. And with the amygdala being the driver of a lot of fear, which leads to, oh my God, I'm gonna a little bit Star Wars out. It's fear that leads to anger, that leads to hate, that leads to the dark side, right?
Right.
Did I get that right? Anyway, so like it's not rocket science, and I think every community has every ruling power has used it since the beginning of time. And sometimes that ends up in like genocide, where like Rwanda, where people went and like hacked up their neighbors.
Yep.
And sometimes it's a slower burn, I think. And I think we have to figure out how do we communicate? And that's what a lot of what I do is messaging and communications. And I started my career in public relations. And how do we message without with using different parts of the brain and cognitive science to say the things we want to say and have them be heard.
Question for, I'll post all three of you on this propaganda, because we talk a lot about how, especially with Strongmen, because it's related to Mussolini and that time frame. But we talk a lot specifically about like the connections to Hitler and Mussolini and 1920s, 30s, and 40s and on fascism. But we don't always talk about like the direct connection of Confederacy fascism and what we're seeing today. So is it in terms of propaganda and say neurolinguistics and like how you use phrases and words, would it be more impactful to stop the so much heavy reference to the Nazi side, even if they think of themselves as Nazis, but appeal to the American ethos side of this is a Confederacy takeover of the US and it's not Nazis. This is really the Confederacy coming back to life. Is there like weight or meaning to that? Do you think that would hit on the American ethos and like tug at heartstrings for people? It's like robber barons versus oligarchs. It's that sort of small difference or subtle word play.
Well, I think that people, when it depends on the, like you're saying, conservatives or the Confederates, right? We want to, that there's not an immediate negative reaction to the Confederacy, I think. So I don't think it would be I get it. So there was this whole thing in internet lore for years that said, oh, the first person who mentions Nazis loses the argument, right? Which I found so tedious and bullshit, because we have, I believe, a duty to learn from history, especially, we have people who survived the Nazis who are still amongst us. It's not like we've evolved past this. So we have to be hyper vigilant against it, I believe. But I think that we haven't been hard enough on the Confederates to negatively brand them, and I believe we should. They're traitors. They're not Confederates. They are traitors to the United States. The traitors lost, thankfully, and we were entirely too kind to them at the time, and in future generations, I believe. So we still haven't finished the work of Reconstruction because of that. So I don't know. I believe we have a duty to to make these historical parallels, and I think that people have a more negative relation or reaction to Nazis. They don't want to be Nazis. They're always the bad guys, and in the future, the ice people will be the bad guys in all the movies and all that. But I don't know. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I would love to brand I keep saying conservatives, the Confederates, but they were the conservatives, right? As negatively as the Nazis, they should be, frankly, but I don't think we're there yet.
Joe, how do you think?
I always think when you're trying to mobilize people to think differently, right? The human brain actually goes to we they, right? It's our old caveman tribalist brain. Great survival strategy when you're hunter-gatherer, not so great when you're living in a complex modern world, right, with medieval institutions and nuclear weapons.
Right. Yep.
And so I think anytime I'm trying to get people to do something differently than they did yesterday, which is one of the hardest freaking things to do as a communicator, I like to throw the so-called enemy outside the United States, right? Because to be honest with you, I live in rural Virginia, and I've got some neighbors who still fly the Confederate flag, in this county. And if you were telling them the Confederacy is coming back, some of their initial reaction would be, hell yeah, let's do it. Because they were brought up, to say, hey, Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson were heroes. They were brilliant. But that's and that's the thing. I fault them to the point of their own self-education, right? Like, because when you grow up in a household, no doubt that if you grow up in India, you're probably going to believe in the Hindu religion. If you grow up in northwestern Ohio in a Roman Catholic house, you're going to think that's the truth, right? And until you walk around the world a little bit and understand things for yourself and challenge some of your previous beliefs and have the courage to do that, then you start to make sense of the world in your own right? So, I don't know, like what I like to do. If I was going to message that, would to have the they be outside the United States. Nobody likes the Nazis, at least no red-blooded American does, because Indiana Jones has taught us you always punch Nazis, right? And
yes,
and Captain America.
Yeah, and Captain America. So I think for me, the real challenge today is to catch the people who voted for this clown in the last 2 elections who are now disaffected by it, right? It's a soybean farmer down the street, here who now doesn't have a market to sell because of tariffs from China, right? And they're, like all politics is local. People are looking after their own needs. And it's kind of like, okay, well, now do you see it? And now that you see it, what I don't want to do is shame you, right? Because when I do that, then you're going into fight or flight mode, and then you're lost. The trick is to be internally sanctimonious for 5 minutes and enjoy the feeling of the Schadenfreude, and then switch mode and be like, hey, listen, welcome to the party, brother, right? And like, now that you see this, let's find common cause, right? So yeah,
right, yeah.
I like that, Steph. The appeal to the emotional side.
And that's the only thing. I mean, you don't convince people of anything unless you get them in their emotions. And as a so you want to get them in emotions. If you're talking to people who, back to the Confederacy, we did, as Tara said, a shit job of making them the bad guys. If anyone's read Heather Cox Richardson's How the South Won the Civil War, we allowed them not to be the bad guys. And that was through all sorts of things beyond the KKK. That was movies like Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation. So there's a lot of conditioning that a lot of people have. I think, and I agree, you don't want to shame them. And, if they're coming to the side, then you just have to welcome them. And that's where we pro-democracy people get sanctimonious. And we weren't with us from the beginning, so you're a piece of shit. But we don't want to say that, but we really think that. Other way I have heard people talk that I think is more useful for the African American community is that these guys are like slave patrols, who can go out and pull anyone off the street, do whatever they want with them, and it's okay. But it has to be both, because I think saying it's the slave patrols is not the Nazis. It's Nazis. It's not slave patrols. I think any historical cognate that we use that appeals to someone's emotions is more effective.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you for bringing that point up about the slave patrols. Is we can do both. We can walk, chew gum,
that's right.
And we can probably do a third thing too. We can probably talk while we're doing it and not fall over in a crisis. Like, we can say that they are slave patrols and they mirror Gestapo tactics of the SS and of Nazi Germany. We can do both. Like, I like that. I prefer that as the answer, because we really should. I think part of all of this, and this is my take on it, is we have to break the propaganda, because the one thing we haven't solved in America is white supremacy. We have not broken that mythos. And to do that, we actually have to confront the Confederacy. And I think tying the Confederacy to Nazism would make a difference. I think tying them into the same breath would add a ownership and a weight to it, because we are appealing to different communities. I'm not saying just to the white community in this. I'm saying, like you just said, Steph, the black community is going to respond very differently when someone says this is a slave patrol than, say, a white Virginian or a white Alabamian might, or even a white person in Idaho who lives in one of the enclaves of the Christ-Kirk churches. Like, but if we can appeal to multiple audiences at the same time with the same message without pandering, and I think that's the difference. Is what we're saying isn't a pandering message. These are bad.
Yeah, that's one of the important things that autocrats try to do is rewrite history, right?
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, like growing up in Northwest Ohio, I was taught a very simple version of the Civil War. It was like North good, bad, South bad, North wins. When, what really opened my eyes, I went down to Natchez, Mississippi with my wife, it must have been like 2013, 2014 timeframe, and went to the Museum of African American History and bumped into the director down there, a guy named Daryl White. And 4 hours later, we ended up walking out, from this amazing conversation that we never intended to have. But he built a picture about like how he said people thought Natchez was a northern town because there were so many people from the north living here before the Civil War. And he just explained how like it was a completely vertically integrated, money-making machine from the cotton fields in Louisiana through the ports all the way up to the textile mills and the shippers in New York City and Boston, all the way over to England, right? So I mean, the North, the wealthy industrialists in the North made as much money off of that, process as the slaveholding families did on their plantations down south, right? So like the trick is to tell the whole history, be brave enough to face the parts of our history where we did not live up to our founding values, right? And be willing to change things, because like, people are throwing around like liberal as a nasty word in some quarters, but like the liberals of the American Revolution was George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin.
Hello.
Right? So it was the conservatives of the time that wanted us to stay tied to King George III, right? And so it's just kind of like in today's age, the folks want to go back to some rosy-colored yesteryear, and I was like, rosy for who, right? Sure, it wasn't rosy for working people. Sure, it wasn't rosy for minorities. And I think to Tara's point, or I don't know if Stephanie made it earlier, this K-shaped economy where the great bamboozlement is to get half of the poor fighting the other half of the poor so that the rich can make out. And I'm loving watching people wake up to the fact that they like the rural worker and the worker in the city have more in common economically, and they're being told by people who want to gain power from their division that they need to fight each other, right? Because of all these bullshit social issues. And it's just like, no, like the real fight is up versus down, not left versus right. So when you really look at it, so that's why I want to see a big return of labor unions, like the whole thing. So
right.
Since we're so close to Martin Luther King's birthday, which I think was yesterday, he made that connection with the poor people's I don't remember, the poor people's cooperative, I don't remember.
Solidarity.
Solidarity. And the ruling classes or the ruling folks really recognized what a problem that was for them. Because when you get the poor whites and the poor blacks together and not fighting each other, then you have much more of a chance to overthrow the status quo. And then one other thing I want to mention. So, oh my God, I am old, so this does make sense. I have done a lot of things, but my dissertation was the history of a museum, and in museums, there is a very particular narrative that is taught, which reflects the values of the people who build it. And so when you go to museums, one, it's really important to have a lot of different kinds, but to recognize that you are being told a story, and decide whether that's or know whether it's reflective of history, because objective historical truth is a little bit of a dicey subject.
Right.
Sorry.
For sure.
Well, and it also builds on like looking at from what Ruth Ben-Ghiat writes in Strongmen is that like the lensing of like 3 different types of time periods, or like time consolidation, so that time becomes meaningless. Because if you notice, the second Donald Trump became president, time became fucking meaningless again. Everybody was like, shit, we are standing still. Like, we are stuck now back on the first day he won. Like, we have gone back. Like, and time stands still because they have this, like, they want to build this utopia of like tech cities and crypto fascist freedom cities, and Greenland is part of the US, and all of the Western hemisphere, all of the Americas are part of the US under one conglomerate nation of corporate greed and might. Like, that's what they think is like a utopia, where they get this tech utopia, but it's only a third of the US population because Curtis Yarvin's nuts and folks like that are crazy as shit. But it's also that like we talked about, is the nostalgia of the past. And part of it is I think we have to break that nostalgia. And that's what part of what I'm trying to do is break the nostalgia of white supremacy and the nostalgia of the Confederacy, because it has to be tied to the evil that it actually was, because the US inspired fascism. Nazis learned from the KKK, learned from the Confederacy. Mitch McConnell is the child of slave owners. Like, we still have folks who are very like closely tied to slavery in this country, and we don't ever fucking talk about it because they've nostalgized all of this, and they make that 1950s mythos of the pretty housewife who's super meek and ready to serve, but underneath she's going to stab her husband because she's taking drugs so she doesn't die. And the suicide or the family destruction rate in the 50s was huge because people were miserable. And then they create this other time loop of crisis. Like, we live in a crisis state every single day. We've been in crisis for over a year, and since starting this new year, every day is a new escalating crisis, and it feels like it's speeding up, it's accelerating. And I think that's part of the mythos anyways of this inevitable, it's going to be here all the time, and we have to, right now is when we really have to be louder than ever and making these connections. So I think this is a really good conversation we've been having about like where we are in the US right now, what has happened, and what has brought us here. Is maybe pose a question on action for us for this second half of our discussion is, where do we go forward? How do we break propaganda, and where do we go forward so that it doesn't become a hot civil war? Because we're already in a civil war in many ways. Like, when we look at this in history, it's going to probably be written Civil War started, Donald Trump got elected, Civil War started.
Like, well, it's because of propaganda. We're in this boat because we have allowed the propaganda to permeate this country. Since the Telecommunications Act of '96, when they deregulated the media, and then now we have these silos of information where people are getting their news from propaganda outlets that literally make its viewers less informed than those who watch no news at all, and then was hit with the largest judgment against the media company. I'm talking about Fox News, for lying to its viewers. And we don't, that should be unacceptable. And because the only profession enshrined in the Constitution is necessary for a functioning democratic republic are the press. So, and they're absolutely under attack. And so and it goes back, everything that we're talking about. I love what you said, Joe, about patriotism, because I've been screaming about this for years, to reclaim patriotism. And I was really heartened to hear Maxwell Frost. He gave a speech in Minneapolis, and he said exactly what I've been saying forever, that patriotism is not eagles and stars. It's caring about your fellow American. It's standing up for each other and leaving no one behind. And we need to have that complete that paradigm shift that, from drinking liberal tears to e pluribus unum, we're in this together. And they have I mean, going back to the 1600s, when the indentured servants, in that brief period of history, the indentured servants, the poor whites, and the enslaved Africans briefly got together and rebelled against the colonial elite. And that's when that terrified
Right.
the lords.
Well,
So
how
they
many people know about it now?
right.
Not
They
very
don't.
many
It's not
because it's been
taught. It's
suppressed.
Purposely
exactly
not taught.
right.
It's kind of like,
And
yeah.
they've been using the same divide and conquer strat, and that's really when we started having a system of racially based slavery. So that would be another big distinction that they, another difference, a distinction without a difference that they could exploit, and they did. So as long as the poor whites were just a little bit higher above the enslaved, then they could keep them under control with propaganda, with and the policies, and it's the same shit all the time. When they started the labor movement, they divided people along racial lines. You don't want to call some N-word your brother. That was the propaganda. And people fell for it, of course, and they still do. So, we have to reclaim, we're in this together. This is a multiracial liberal democracy, and that's what makes America great. Not that, we have some billionaires that's what they have changed the American dream from, we can have a decent life. Freedom means being able to go to a doctor or, retire in security and all. But they've changed that to, oh, you can be a billionaire. And that's the American dream now? No, I don't think so. But we have to reclaim that, I think, through propaganda. So, yeah.
Freedom is slavery. War is peace. Not, or what is the last one? Ignorance is knowledge is ignorance, or ignorance is something. I forget the last line.
I think it's.
Are you talking about the song or?
No, from 1984, George Orwell.
Oh.
Yeah. I've got a good local example if you're interested.
Yeah,
does
absolutely.
relate to books, since this is the book club. Yeah, so when we moved out to our town, we live in a rural county in Virginia. We saw an article in the Washington Post about like this library that was under attack by book banners, and after I read through the article, I was like, holy shit, that's our library, right? It's been around since like the late 1700s. Was operated as a PPV with the county, so it had its own 501c3 board for the library. The C3 owned the books. They raised 30% of the operating costs of the library every year. And had countless volunteer hours, like hundreds and hundreds or thousands of volunteer hours per year. So it was economically in the best interest of the county to maintain this PPV, until some very right-wing conservative folks of a specified religion, which really isn't important to the story, were objecting to the LGBTQ books in the library. So the library is like, okay, well, let's hear your concerns. Let's make a few changes. Let's pull them out of the children's section, have a young adult section. And hey, be a parent. Like, if you don't want your kids to read certain books, we respect that right. Just let us know. And, we'll make sure that they have parental permission before they can check these books out. Fine, no problem, right? Wasn't good enough, right? So they cowed, 4 of the county board of supervisors into backing, their play. And advancing this bullshit far right ideology within county government, which shouldn't be political at all, right? And so it got so toxic, and people started speaking up. And there was a session last November or December where 3-hour public comment session. 95% of the people that were rolling in there were speaking in support of the library, 5% against, and they voted against the will of the people anyway. And so we're just like, well, shit, what are we going to do about this? How do we get them out of office? And the local Dems, who are like 30% of the electorate out here, were like, we're never going to win an election outright. But if we swing 30% of the vote for a centrist Republican candidate, that's going to make the difference. And they did that last June in the primary and beat the shit out of 2 of the incumbents by 20 percentage points each. So I'm pleased to say we have a library or a county board of supervisors that was 4-1 against the library to 3-2 in support of the library this January when they seated the new board of supervisors. And it was what got to the point was like people were so tired of the bullshit. And they found language to speak to the people right of center. It was like, hey, this is government overreach. Do you really want some government bureaucrat telling you what you can and can't read in the library that you pay with your tax dollars, right? And so it can be done, right? Where people are exhausted by the bullshit, fight for the common ground, fight for the center,
Right. Yeah. And
Well,
it's been done. That has been. Lots of communities have succeeded with the library.
Yep.
It's bigger than that. But Nick, you were about to say something.
It also ties into what Melissa Corrigan has put a lot of focus on is the flock safety cameras, and communities coming together in multiple places around the country to say, no, we don't want these in our town or on our streets, and then flock ignoring that statements and or putting cameras back up after they've been told to take them down, or then buying private property and putting a camera on it so that they can own a small piece of camera spot just so that they can have a camera there, even after the town told them, no, we don't want these things. That's where local action is really powerful, is because you make a statement and you change policy. Like, if you don't want flock safety cameras in your town, you can go to your local county board meeting or and just go, hey, when was this approved? Who approved these cameras? What was the budget? What was the data? What's the data retention and handling policies? How do we access those? Where's the map of these cameras and where are they located? And why do we have, say, in my town, 19 freaking cameras for a town that has like 30,000 people? Like, why do we need 19 cameras? There's like 12 streets in our freaking town. Like, there's 4 main streets and that's it. You don't need 19 cameras for us. What are you doing? What are we doing here? And I live in Arkansas, which means we're the testing grounds where they put a lot of these things. States like Arkansas and the South, where they just said, yeah, we won't fight you for it. But that's the type of like community pressure that we can put to stop what Ruth Ben-Ghiat in her book calls is like purges and like exclusionary tactics. It's the othering that we've all talked about, but it's that purging of books and knowledge, and we fight back. We are the line of defense, not the government.
Yes.
The government responds to us. We don't respond to the government, because when the government fears the people, we have a democracy. When the people fear the government, you have autocracy.
Right.
And so we're on the latter of the two, not the former.
Yes, but it's also telling people who the out groups are. They're always going after gay people, trans people. At this time, I think it's all the more important to stand by our trans brothers and sisters, I believe, because they're under attack, just like they attacked the Nazis. I mean, the Nazis attacked the trans people first. That was their first target when they started getting power. So, and I try to make that correlation all the time, too, because it's just, a misunderstood minority group that's less than 1% of the population. And it triggers all their large amygdalas. It's gender is a construct, and, they go all, cuckoo about it and just leave people the fuck alone. I mean, that's the message. Get your filthy fascist big government face out of people's private lives. Like, so what? Leave people alone. And so, as we see, they said nothing about trans people for years. Basically, they were getting their bang for their buck, going after the regular old gays, right? And then that stopped having an effect as much as they like. So because people, gay people were just integrated into life, and they were less demonized. It was less, because, and this is all related to propaganda, because that's how they could get away with it through propaganda. And and just vilifying a group that they really have no clear understanding of, and it doesn't even matter. They don't care. It would be anybody if, really. It just so happens to be trans people now because they're an easy target. And anyway.
The list is long.
Yeah.
And everyone's on it.
That's right. That's really that is it right there. We're all on that list. The trans people might be, getting a lot of the heat at this point, but
thinking of lists,
yeah.
I saw an article, or I got a notification about it, is that there was a university. Oh, it was on Substack. I think Cliff Schechter put it out about Penn State or UPenn, Penn needing or being told that they need to collect a list of Jewish students. That sounds
and faculty.
That sounds pretty fucking Nazi to me.
It's amazing how they do that.
We've been warning about they're going to make lists of people and they're going to concentrate you into camps eventually. They're going to call them freedom cities or work studies, and they're going to concentrate you because you're on a fucking list. Like,
patriot re-education, they'll call it. Right?
Patriotic re-education camps or whatever they did in the Handmaid's Tale. Like, it's Gilead that they want. It's a theonomy, not a. I think there's a difference in language that I want to impress on some people. Is something that I learned from Tim Whitaker, was the theonomy versus theocracy. Is they want a theonomy, and that's a very specific Christian-based civil system that merges old Christian or old Israeli Testament law into civics, and then uses like preachers and stuff as part of it. But it's all still founded in the civil society, but only Christian based. It's not Catholic based. It's not any of the other denominations. It's a Christian specific, and that's where a lot of them are at. But there's also other techno-theonomy. They want their nation states and whatever, but they want to merge into a Gilead, and that's what we're fighting against. Is that propaganda, or things like what you get on DHS's Podium, where Kristi Noem had one of us, all of yours, one of ours,
all of yours, and there you go. I mean, they can't help it.
Slogan.
It's not an official. It was never an official whatever, but they.
It was an official slogan, but it was an official policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Every Nazi they killed 50 to 100 Jews.
Yeah, like the town of Lidice. How do you pronounce it? Lidice, where they completely razed the town. Lidice, 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 and they killed all the men. Put the women in concentration camps, killed the children, and razed the town. They completely took it off the map in retaliation for the assassination of Heydrich. The Heinrich Heydrich, the number 3 on in the SS, one of the architects of the Holocaust. But that's what. See, this is what concerns me, and I've said it for years, and every Republican chest beats the heart of fascism. I don't know. I mean, they can't help it. This is who they are. She probably doesn't even know. This is the history of that, of what happened in Nazi Germany. They just carry out the same orders because it's nothing new here. It's the same old tactics.
Well, I mean, in a sense, like, people's brains are wired to be comfortable with different levels of uncertainty, right? Typically they show if you're more of the law and order type, you do have a larger amygdala, right, and a larger reaction. And it's just kind of like, when I'm in a state of fear, who do I look for to provide that predictability through law and order, right? The state. And it also runs counter to the history of this country, and allegedly what it was founded on, or was sought to be, as its initial ideals, was as much freedom from religion as freedom of religion, right? Because people coming to this country were fleeing bloody religious wars in Europe with Protestants and Catholics who allegedly believe in the same God, slaughtering each other by the thousands or millions. And coming here, and even in the early days, like the between Virginia and Maryland, you had Catholics and Protestants fighting each other over here, right? So it's kind of like, how do you kind of keep a lid on that sectarian kind of stuff? Is really by allowing the establishment of no official religion, right? So I mean, I think because people will parse that stuff to the nth degree, and like you said, it doesn't take that much for normal neighbors who are living peaceably by each other to start hacking each other apart with machetes, given the right impulse. Because you saw that you mentioned in Rwanda, with the Hutus and the Tutsis, the Balkans, right? There was a Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, and a couple years later, people were hacking each other to bits, right? In a middle class country in Europe, right? So I mean, the thought that it couldn't happen here, which is also another good book. Really, given enough pressure, just about anything could happen, right? In a country with more guns than people, the potential is there, right? And I think there's a misbelief on the side of the far right that they're the ones that have all the guns, and I think they would be surprised to find out, like, the reality within the United States, and God hope it never comes to that. And I think that's the other thing too, is how many people are sitting out there beating their chest and crowing for a civil war, actively wanting it, and having been to a country that has experienced one or two, and watching how everything comes apart and how bloody and ugly and messy it is. It's kind of like, no, I hope that never happens here, because I've seen what that looks like on the ground in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, which is a whole nother ball of wax. But yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, what's encouraging is watching people not back down in spite of the fear, in spite of watching a woman get murdered in cold blood for no reason. And, and all the brutality that ICE is inflicting on these communities. And people are, they're not. That would chill me more if everybody just stayed home and everything went quiet. I would be a little bit more concerned about where we are headed. But because I think that there's even though we have never achieved this promise, there is a promise of America that we expect a certain level of freedom, and we expect our when we ask a cop, give me a badge number, who are you? You got a warrant, that they respond, that there is a legal process here. But it's all off the rails now.
Well, when those in power refuse to abide by the laws that they're duty bound to enforce, what reason is there for any other citizen to subjugate themselves to that law?
That's right.
I mean, that is the fastest pathway to a Hobbesian state, is when the rule of law and the system of checks and balances fails, right? Because it's kind of like, if they're not going to follow it, I'm not going to assume that I'm safe if they come to the door, and that they're going to respect my rights. And if I have the means to defend myself, that's going to turn into a hostile, bloody situation real quick, where some folks aren't going home that night. And again, I hope it doesn't come to that. I'm not advocating for that, but it's just kind of like, that is what I fear, and that's kind of like I'm like, my spidey senses are tingling about this stuff, and it's just like, de-escalation is probably the fastest way to not get shot, right? So,
and at a larger level, I mean, that's at a personal level, and I don't know whether you can de-escalate on a personal level if you've got people hyped up on so much hatred and white supremacy and misogyny. But at the larger level of states, one is who's going to call they're going after blue states. So who's going to call out the National Guard? And is that going to be, like the front line? Or what is the contract, the social contract between the state and the feds right now, if the feds aren't holding up their end of the contract? So then, what is, like, Chris Armitage calls it soft secession. I don't like that term, as it puts everybody on edge. But, what are the responsibilities of the states towards the federal government if the federal government isn't taking its responsibilities to the states seriously?
Right. If the federal government is waging war against the half the country, because they won an election by 1.6% of the vote, and they don't have a mandate. Nobody voted for this. They voted for mass deportation now, but they didn't vote for no due process. This is what he told them, of course, that there is, and they never actually govern on the things that they run on, that's for sure. So, and we know, because we know what's going on. This is a coup. They don't want democracy getting in the way of their greed and they don't care. They're gonna. They've been destroying it. I mean, conservatism is a fundamentally undemocratic ideology that is a very hierarchical ideology. Big Daddy at the top and everybody else in their place. So, but and people are waking up now because they see the sting of the lash of the policies falling on their shoulders now, unfortunately. But I mean, it takes that, unfortunately.
With the escalating tensions and the acceleration of escalating tensions from the feds towards everybody else,
right.
There's a lot of people who are very concerned about a very sharp spike in violence and what it would mean if, say, a governor were to call the National Guard up and say Governor Walz decides to call the Minnesota National Guard and says, "Hey, everybody come out. We're going to ensure that the public is safe."
Yep.
And it's all framed at public safety. And it's because that's what it has to be. It has to be safety for the public. That's what the Guard is for. That is what the Guard is meant to do, is protect the sovereignty of their states.
A free state,
more
right?
of a volunteer force, like we're talking about the not standing army, because for the most part, the Guard is not standing all the time. They're a volunteer force that comes in on the weekends, and they do some administrative work during the weeks and things like that. So they keep running, but they're not actively going all the time. So what do you say happens if a governor, say Governor Walz, does have to call up the Guard? Does that become an escalation point because it would be in the eyes of the feds. They would say treason, insurrection, seditious treason. It's not lost on me that they're doing this to the prior VP candidate for the last election, who is still a governor. It's not a coincidence in my mind that they're targeting Minnesota and
it's not,
because of the last election.
And Ilhan Omar too. It's her district. Yeah.
And so, Joe, what are your thoughts on, and Steph and Tara too, what are your thoughts on what happens when that happens? Because there's a lot of fear around what might come next. And I don't like sugarcoating things, but I also don't want to fear and rage bait and make people more afraid. I want to give people tools so that they can be prepared.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that Minnesota's already showing that they don't have enough capability, even surging people in there there's more Minnesotans than there are people in ICE, right? Even just living in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, so, that's one city. And what if, take the top income producing states in the United States, which are all blue states, right? And what if all their governors would be doing the same thing at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Then what, right? When, the Big Ten colleges said, hey, attack on one is attack on all of us, and we'll provide mutual aid to the rest, to whoever's being targeted through academia. Okay. It's the same thing. It's kind of it's not just one incident acting in isolation, because there's only, with active duty Guard and reserves, there's 2.2 million total people in our military, many of whom are deployed around the world. So it's not a situation that the federal government can win long term with those tactics, because every single further affront cause more grievance. And it's just kind of who really would want to be a dictator? How does that retirement plan work? How did it work for Saddam? How did it work for Gaddafi? How did it work for Ceausescu?
Wow.
What I mean?
It works okay for some of them.
In the short term, but in the long term, not so good.
Yeah, well, Trump does. I mean, he's 80 years old. I mean, that's why I'm baffled. He's mentally ill, of course.
Well, it's not
never
Trump
enough
anymore.
money.
It's all of
it's all of them. Stephen Miller.
Sure.
This horrible Stephen Miller, who even though they're like, oh, he's Jewish, you can't call him a Nazi.
No, he's a fucking Nazi.
I know
he's
an
Abrahamic fascist. He's a Nazi.
He's a Nazi.
Yeah.
I mean,
Netanyahu's a Nazi. would be akin to a Nazi. So,
well,
like,
there was a
it
Nazi.
doesn't matter what your religion is. There was a
Exactly.
Jews for Nazis.
That's what I was just
in
going to
Germany.
say. In Germany, the National Association of German Jews that were all supporting Hitler. And
I mean, another thing to keep in mind is that, you know, we haven't had large scale kind of like violent outbreaks in the United States for a long time. You know, if you go back to, like, you know, when it seems like the arc of history is like the uber wealthy take and they take again and they take again and they take again and they take again, and all of a sudden they reach a point where they're taking too much, right? And then working people are like, nope, this is bullshit. Like, we want some of the cream too. And then bricks start flying through bank windows. You have factory strikes, all this other stuff, mine strikes. You know, like you had at Paint Creek and Mattawan and you know, Blair Mountain, and all of a sudden this big thing happens, right? Where it turns violent, and workers were clashing with Pinkertons or federal, you know, the National Guard or whoever was called out to put down the strike. And then that got reported, and public opinion started to change. But that was slow because we only had newspapers, you know, we had radio, you know, starting in the early, you know, you had a few handful of TV stations, but now you have everyone with a freaking cell phone, right? Which is both good and bad, right? But the good part is, like, you have multiple, like, for instance, in the shooting in the critical 6 seconds, as it's being called in Minneapolis, right, where Renee Good was shot, you had one story coming from Christine Ohm, another one coming, you know, from the president, kind of closely aligned. And now that the New York Times was able to sync up so many different camera angles on that thing and show in real time where he was, he didn't get hit by the car. He put his hand with the cell phone out on the car. The wheels were turned in a different direction, and he made the decision to kill this woman. Right.
And he chased her down and shot her 2 times as she was. It was
that wouldn't have happened before this. You know what I mean? We wouldn't have the capability, and it would give greater power to the, you know, the powers that be, to limit that knowledge. So gatekeeping has been diminished greatly. The problem is that misinformation can also travel as fast. Right? But I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I think about, you know, the labor wars that happened even in my hometown in Toledo, Ohio, where, you know, rich factory owners were squeezing the workers, and they just had enough, and they just started, you know, like, we're communicating with you and expressing our displeasure. You are not changing your behavior, and now we're going to communicate through other means. And it's just kind of like all of that could have been avoided if they just gave workers another $1 an hour. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know, these guys are living in mansions, you know, not paying taxes, and, you know, and just treating people just a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it either. I don't understand. It's just, it's like a mental illness. It's greed, and that we have to categorize it as such. Just like you would say to somebody who's hoarding newspapers or cats or something that they have a mental illness. I mean, how much money do you need? There should be no billionaires. That's a disease. That's disgusting. It's all of us are. But then you get, you know, what really drives me crazy is people who contact me on my show or whatever. They're like, you know, praising the billionaires. Like, I have a good job because of a billionaire or whatever. But they're not putting it together. It's you know, you could still have a good job, but we don't. Why do we need billionaires? Like one dude. I mean, haven't you seen you know, the Marvel super villain movies enough? Like, you know what I mean? That's what Elon Musk reminds me of, and trying to and the only reason they have this money, they're buying politicians, corrupting government, and ensuring that we don't have the means to do anything about it. So that's why you don't have health care. That's why, you know, you can't afford your retirement. I just read this social media post, and I was doing a thing about it, writing an article on it. This woman who, it's heartbreaking. You know, it was on the Leopards Eating My Face Facebook page. I mean, Reddit page. And she's like, I'm 88. I worked my whole life. They just cut my Medicaid. She had Medicare and Medicaid. Now I can't afford my prescriptions. I live on $900 a month. Now I can't eat. I have to, you know, it's just like, what the fuck is wrong with us? That is a disgrace that we should all be embarrassed about. And she voted for Trump 3 times, which, you know, there you go. I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, there's the talk about propaganda. That's why that woman voted for Trump 3 times. She clearly has a perception or whatever, a distorted perception of what he is and
Well, there's different reality. I mean, you started off by talking about reality being a hallucination, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think we have vastly different hallucinations of what the world is and what goes on in it because of the proliferation of media and the ideological and informational bubbles we're in. I do not think we live in the same reality as the fascists.
And I think that's a good place for us to end our discussion for today as we reach the hour mark for our show. And this is where I get the chance to promote my friends and have y'all promote yourselves because that's building our community here. And what we're trying to do is get the message out. Because to break the propaganda, we don't need one Joe Rogan of the left. We need a Nick Parrow of the left. We need a Tara Devlin of the left. We need a Stephanie Wilson of the left. We need a Joe Plensler of the left. We need a Chris Goldsmith of the left. We need a Melissa Corrigan of the left, a Shane Urich of the left. We need a million voices for a million issues. So sell yourselves. Joe, I'll start with you. It's been really good to get to have you on and in this discussion. I really appreciate your insights. You've helped drive a really fascinating and insightful conversation for this last hour. So please come support Joe. And Joe, sell yourself. How can people find you and support your work?
Yeah, thanks. I'm new to Substack, so I'm just starting out here. So I can use all the tips I can get, but I'm on Blue Sky. I got rid of most mainstream meta-oriented social media just because I couldn't stand what was going on over there anymore. And I'm not on Twitter either. So you'll find me on Blue Sky at Saint Terrificus, which there's one other joke behind that name, or on Substack. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Oh, awesome. We have two QR scans. So thank you to whoever scanned the QR for us for Joe. Subscribe to him if you're on Substack. Hit that top right corner or top left corner where all the names are, and you can subscribe to everyone for free. And it's a great way to support. So Joe, thanks for coming on, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again here at the end of the month for another discussion on Window of Discussion and getting your thoughts there. This has been really awesome. Hopefully we'll have you back again. There's an open invite every Friday if you want to join. So feel free and welcome. And we got another.
This is so much fun. I can't believe an hour's over already.
I know, right?
Went fast.
Yeah, that's the best part. That's how you know it's been a good conversation. As you look up and it's 55 minutes into the show, and you're like, "Shit, we got to end it." And then next we have return host, good friend, Dr. Stephanie Wilson. Freedom Over Fascism and her B Cognition Labs, Better Humaning. Steph, sell yourself, my friend.
So I have Freedom Over Fascism, and I have a live conversation on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 1. This coming week, I am talking to Amanda Littman, who is the founder of Run for Something, and William Finnegan, who is borderless living on Substack, but he was a very high-ranking civilian, I think, official in DOD. And so he thinks in terms of systems. So we're going to talk about systems. And I'm on the chronic illness on Monday at 11. You can find me here. And what Nick referred to is I do human-centered leadership growth classes and coaching. I do career coaching and chronic, oh my God, there's a lot of C's, chronic illness coaching as well. So I hope to see you soon. And so if you could subscribe, that would be awesome. Paid is better, but free is okay too. Thanks.
Thanks, Steph. I appreciate it, and so glad to have you with us. I love your insights throughout the show, as always, in all these discussions. Next, good friend Tara Devlin, Terror Buster, and being unapologetic as she always is.
Yes.
Sell yourself, my friend. We've had so many QR scans today. Thank you to everyone in the audience who's scanning QR codes.
Yes.
We've had 6 so far between all of the hosts thus far. So great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Tara, sell yourself, my friend.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard when you say that. I get all like, what do I say? Yeah, just if you can follow my Substack. I know you can. I know you can do it. Please do. It takes just a minute, and because I got to get those numbers up. I'm generally writing only on Substack now, because everywhere else is a cesspool. And so you could find out, when the show goes live. I do a show live on Tuesdays and Fridays at Tuesdays at 2 p.m. on the Political Voices Network, and Fridays 8:30 p.m. tonight. We'll have a show. And yeah, it's pretty cool. On Fridays, it's kind of loose, and we hang out and, talk, and we go through the news, and through an unapologetically liberal lens. And for long-term viewers and listeners like Jim, I see Jim on my chat over here on YouTube. Thank you, Jim. Nice to see you. And we've been ahead of the curve, I have to say, because we're the ones who've been railing about patriotism, reclaiming patriotism, talking about, getting the message back, reclaiming it from the right wingers who really, it seems to me, lack the fundamental maturity to function in the free democratic society that they can only pretend to love. So,
well,
I mean, know them by their fruits, guys, right? So,
yeah.
All right.
Pay attention to what they do,
you.
not just what they say.
Not what they say. Exactly.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you.
We've had so
We've
many
got a
QR
lot of
scans
scans.
today.
Wow.
Shit.
Oh, thank you.
Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much.
It's been a great show and very nice.
It has.
Conversation.
So
we need it.
myself here. Quick.
Oh no.
Uh-oh. He's breaking up.
All right. Nick has.
I know. As soon as he's doing his promotion, you're breaking up, Nick.
So he has Sick of the Shit publications. And stop me when you come back, Nick. Am
I back?
You're back now.
I think you're back. Yes.
I'm back. I think I figured it out. I was trying to do too much on my computer at once. I've got Sick of the Shit publications where I do chronic illness discussions, men's health and men's intelligent masculinity discussion, helping bring us towards a better, more positive humaning experience. It's a lot of better humaning, but I focus on men because that's my lane, because I know men well. I am one, and I've had some experience in this, and there's a great conversation we've been having on intelligent masculinity and what it means to be a man. And Joe, I would love to get you on for one of those discussions, and your experiences with masculinity and how you've come to where you are in your life. So come join me for that on Sick of This Shit. And then finally, support the network, support Banner and Backbone. This is where we bring everything together. This is how we're still working on and very, very close to some very cool calendar tooling. I've been stress testing a tool for a community calendar that will help us deconflict across all of our Substack platforms for show timing, allow people to have easy access to the links for all of our shows, know who's guests, so that you can easily plan events and see all of your favorite and best content creators that you really love and enjoy in the work that they do. And so that we don't overlap each other unless we need to. So we can, like I said, 1 million issues for 1 million voices. So we may as well support as many as we can.
Yes.
So come support Banner and Backbone and help us build that and build this platform so we can add those tools and get stuff out for everyone. And once this show is over, about 15, 20 minutes from now, you'll start seeing shorts and clips coming out on TikTok, on YouTube, and Facebook. Banner and Backbone has expanded into some additional platforms. I don't like Meta very much, but we expanded on there because if we can get the information there, that's where they live, and they may as well know it. I will not go on to Twitter because I do not like that Nazi. So
it's the worst. It really is.
Yeah. We punch up. Yeah. And we punch up here on Banner and Backbone. We don't punch down. We punch up, and we punch up hard. And we know what we're doing. We have vaginal fortitude, and we hit the testicles where they matter. That's right. You'll know, Chris, I play on that is because women are way stronger.
There's a great Betty White quote about that. Yeah.
I won't say it. We won't ruin the book club with the other quote that I might say. But thank you, everyone, for joining us here today on Banner and Backbone's Anti-Fascist Book Club. This has been an incredible discussion with me. I'm Nick Perro, Tara Devlin, Stephanie Wilson, and Joe Plensler. And we hope to see you all next week again here at 12:30 Eastern Time for our next continued discussion into Ruth Ben Ghiat's Strongmen. Have a great afternoon.